Welcome back. You're curious, you want to understand the big picture, maybe without spending forever getting there.
And today, that big picture is Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments, the 1956 one.
Yeah, exactly. It clocks in at nearly 4 hours, which is, well, it's a serious commitment.
Definitely. But the idea today is, can we sort of distill its essence, get to the heart of it?
That's the plan.
Yeah.
I mean, even just seeing the poster for the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
It just screams epic, doesn't it?
It really does. Those images, that sheer scale. It's a film that's really soaked into the culture, I think.
Yeah, whether you've sat through all, 220 minutes? Or we've got bits and pieces.
Right. So if you're a film buff or maybe just, curious about this huge piece of movie history, we're hoping this will be interesting and accessible, too.
Absolutely. We're talking Cecil B. DeMille.
Yeah.
The guy was spectacle. A biblical story, historical drama, just massive.
And the box office reflected that, didn't it? Huge success, like over $120 million back then on a $13 million budget. Incredible.
It's just staggering. So our mission, if you will, for this deep dive is to sort of pull out the most important bits, the most interesting aspects of this landmark film.
Okay, so tackling something as, immense as the Ten Commandments, where do we even start?
I think the story itself, the core narrative, that seems like the place.
Makes sense. The story of Moses. It's pretty wild when you lay it all out.
It really is. I mean, from being found in a basket in the reeds.
Miraculously rescued, all the way to receiving the Ten Commandments up on Mount Sinai. It's an incredible arc.
You see him grow up as a prince of Egypt, then that bombshell discovery about his Hebrew background.
Which leads to his exile, of course, and then the whole return as a prophet, the Exodus, leading his people out. It's epic.
Such a journey.
And what makes it so gripping, I think, is that conflict woven through it with Ramses, his stepbrother.
Right. They're raised together almost equals at first.
But their paths just diverge so dramatically. Moses finds this spiritual calling, champions freedom.
While Ramses just digs in, clings to the power he knows, the Pharaoh.
Exactly. And that contrast, that difference in what drives them. That's really the engine of the whole drama.
It absolutely is. And you can't talk about the story without mentioning those huge, iconic moments.
Oh, yeah, the 10 plagues.
They really build, don't they? Each one feels more devastating. That sense of divine power escalating.
Definitely. And then, the big one, the parting of the Red Sea.
I mean, is there a more famous special effects sequence from that era? It's just burned into people's minds.
Probably not. It just speaks to what the film was trying to do, right? Match the scale of the story with the scale of the filmmaking.
Yeah, they were absolutely aiming for grand. Which kind of leads us into the structure and the overall tone, I guess.
Good point. It's structured in a really interesting way. One review called it 2 epics in 1.
That feels right. The first half is all about Moses in Egypt, his rise in the court, then the fall. It's almost its own story.
Full of palace intrigue, privilege, betrayal.
Yeah.
And then boom, the second half shifts. It becomes the Exodus story.
The journey, the miracles, the plagues, that sense of, divine mission unfolding.
And the tone across both parts. It's just grand,
Yeah.
serious, mythic almost.
Totally. You have those booming voices, the sort of proclamations.
And that music, always swelling, always emphasizing the drama, the importance of it all. A lot of melodrama baked in.
Yeah, it fully embraces being big, which, you can react to in different ways.
How so?
Well, for some people, that grandeur is the appeal. It feels majestic, fitting for the subject.
But for others,
maybe it feels a bit much, a bit overwrought at times. It's definitely a distinct style, something to think about.
And speaking of that grand feeling, the performances really lean into it. This is classic old Hollywood.
Oh, completely. Charlton Heston as Moses. Someone described him as looking carved from marble.
That's perfect. He has this incredible presence, that sense of righteousness. You really see the transformation in him.
You feel the weight on his shoulders, yeah.
And opposite him, Brynner as Ramesses. He's just as powerful.
Absolutely. Regal, proud, but also torn, as he faces Moses.
Their scenes together are electric. That conflict is the absolute core of the film.
Definitely. And then you have Anne Baxter as Nefertiti.
Right, bringing that classic Hollywood glamour. Her role is maybe a bit more on the melodramatic side.
Yeah, driven by love and jealousy. And Edward G. Robinson as Dathan.
Oh, he's great. Just deliciously slimy, isn't he? The sort of corrupting influence among the Hebrews. You love to hate him.
Totally. And Yvonne, Carlo, Debra, Paget. They're in more supporting roles, but they add to the texture.
It really is, like that quote said, big voices, big faces, big emotions. They went all in.
They really did. Which, speaking of big, let's talk visuals, the effects. For 1956, some of this stuff is just, wow.
It's amazing what they pulled off. The Red Sea obviously is the showstopper.
How did they even do that back then? It wasn't CGI.
No, not at all. It was this incredible combination of practical effects, huge water tanks filmed pouring, then optically composited with shots of the actors and extras. Really complex, painstaking work.
And it still looks powerful, doesn't it? Even if you know how it's done.
It really does. But it wasn't just that. Think about the plagues.
Yeah, like the 10th plague, that creeping death fog. It's genuinely eerie.
Very effective. And the burning bush, the pillar of fire, Mount Sinai itself, all thunder and lightning.
All designed to create that sense of awe, of the divine intervening.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the effects. The costumes are incredible. The sets are enormous.
Thousands of extras filling the screen. That feeling of scale is constant.
And shot in Technicolor, which gives it that super vibrant look, and VistaVision, that widescreen format. Those deserts, the gold temples, they really leap off the screen.
A total visual feast. And you can't talk about the feeling of the film without the music.
Elmer Bernstein's score. Legendary is the right word.
It really is. Soaring, unforgettable. It hits all the right notes. Majestic, sad, reverent.
It just matches the biblical tone perfectly. It really lifts every scene.
And that carries over into the dialogue delivery, too, that kind of heightened feel.
Yeah, it's very deliberate, isn't it? Almost like listening to scripture being read aloud, or like Shakespeare. Very formal.
Very declarative. So let it be written. So let it be done.
Exactly. Which, okay, maybe sometimes it brushes up against being a little campy.
Maybe a tiny bit. But it's always earnest, you know? They absolutely believe in the weight of those words.
Completely sincere. So, okay, we've talked spectacle, performance, sound. What about the deeper stuff, the themes? Does it still feel relevant?
I think so. It tackles some really big, timeless ideas.
Like the obvious one, faith versus power.
Right. Moses turning his back on the Egyptian court, answering this divine call, compared to Ramses, who just can't let go of his earthly power.
That's central. And then there's the whole theme of freedom, obviously, and identity.
The Hebrews struggling to become a people again, to find their identity after, generations of slavery.
Yeah, reclaiming that heritage. And the film is pretty clear about the corruption that comes with power, too, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. The wealth and splendor of Egypt is shown to be built entirely on slave labor. It's quite stark.
And then, of course, the giving of the law, the 10 Commandments themselves.
Presented as, like, the foundation stone for a moral society, a covenant.
Exactly. It's very much Old Testament morality writ large, like our source material said. Judgment, but also grace. These are huge themes.
They are. But, we should probably acknowledge some of the criticisms, too, to keep things balanced.
Fair point. No film is perfect, especially one this old and this, ambitious.
Well, the pacing. For one.
Yeah.
Nearly 4 hours. That's a tough sell for some modern viewers, maybe. It's definitely slower than films today.
That's true. It demands patience. And the dialogue, as we said, is very theatrical. Not a lot of subtlety there.
Right. And, looking at it now, the female characters are pretty secondary, wouldn't you say? It's very much a male-driven story.
That's a fair criticism, reflecting the time, perhaps, but definitely noticeable today. Nefertiti is prominent, but her motivations are quite traditional for the era.
And maybe the focus is so much on the spectacle, the grand gestures, that sometimes the deeper character stuff gets a bit lost.
Possibly. But it's interesting how one perspective reframes these points. Not as flaws, necessarily.
But as part of what the film is.
Exactly. It wasn't trying to be subtle or introspective. It was aiming for mythic, immense, eternal, almost. The style serves that goal.
That makes sense. It leans into its own nature.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to those moments that just stick with you. The highlights.
Got to be the Red Sea again, right? Just the sheer thrill of seeing that.
Absolutely. And Heston facing down Brynner. Let my people go.
Iconic. Just pure cinematic confrontation.
And the burning bush scene. There's a real sense of mystery and power there. Didn't Heston also do the voice of God for that bit?
He did, yeah. Which adds a whole other layer to it.
And the giving of the commandments on Sinai, that sequence is just wild. Thunderous, almost psychedelic, pure awe.
Yeah, it's meant to overwhelm you. And again, Bernstein's score just lifts all of those moments, that choir of trumpets feeling.
So wrapping this up then, how do we summarize the 10 Commandments? Where does it stand?
Well, I think you have to call it the gold standard of the biblical epic, don't you? It's just so massive, so sincere, so unforgettable.
It really captures that old Hollywood idea of cinema as myth-making. Spectacle and scripture rolled into one giant package.
Totally. And yeah, look, some parts might feel dated now. The style, the pacing.
But the ambition,
Yeah.
the sincerity, the visual power, that still comes through, I think. It's still a pretty stunning achievement, visually and emotionally.
Agreed. And the fact that it's still watched regularly, like during Passover and Easter for many families, that says a lot about its cultural staying power.
It really does.
Yeah.
So, maybe a final thought to leave people with.
Okay, how about this? Think about how this specific, incredibly grand, cinematic version of these foundational stories might have shaped how we culturally think about things like faith and power and freedom.
How does its approach compare to how modern films or shows tackle similar epic themes, maybe with more nuance or maybe less certainty?
Exactly. In an age where we often value subtlety, what can we still take away from this film's really bold, unsubtle, completely earnest approach to telling a mythic story? Is there still power in that kind of filmmaking?
That's a great question to ponder, something to think about next time those iconic images pop up.